Cool. What's up, guys? It's Super Citizen here. I ain't never Stefan. So, good morning to y'all. I know it's had to be afternoon, so I hope everybody get up. Make sure y'all please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. And so, you got stories to check. I ain't never be alone when you enter the restroom.
One day, I got a call from a few friends of mine about going to the mall. It was a stressful weekend.
He ain't gonna say what his name was. He should have said hi. Yeah, so I'm Kevin, or I'm Sarah, or I'm something else. He just started like one day. Yeah, something. Who starts off like that?
Work, so I thought some retail therapy would definitely help. We ended up shopping for a few hours, so we decided that hitting the food court would be the spot. I gave the girls my order, and I told them I would come back and find them as I needed them after I used the restroom. The restrooms are at the end of the large and wide corridor. They were your typical mall type with lots of stalls. Anyway, so I sat down to use the bathroom, and I could see from the gap on the floor between the wall of the stall and the floor, lots of movement from someone's shadow. I wasn't sure if they were getting changed or not, so I didn't pay attention at first, but it felt like the shadow was coming from above at some points. You know, as if the light above was being obstructed by something. After maybe the third time, I decided to look up, and I could see a phone and parts of a guy's arm leaning over. Someone was taking photos of me. I instantly shouted out, "What are you doing, you pervert?" And in a moment of sheer shock and disbelief, this all very quickly turned into fear as I got up and leaped out of the stall and was greeted by an empty bathroom. Not one person was in sight, and from the quick glance of the mirrors opposite, there was only one stall shut, and it was the one next to me. I ran for the restroom exit, but it was locked. Luckily, it had a twist lock, and I could turn it as I did. I heard the stall open from behind me. I got out immediately and turned as I exited and noticed a sign on the door saying, "Closed for maintenance." This sign was not here when I went in. I screamed some more, shouting to get anyone's attention as I ran down the corridor toward the food hall, and had obviously caught the attention of a few people. A group of 3 guys stopped me and clearly could see the panic in my eyes. They asked me questions and I explained. 2 guys ran toward the ladies' restroom, and one to find security. Security arrived within seconds. After a while, a rather large crowd had gathered due to the commotion, and although I was in the comfort of my friends, security, and now the police, I never felt so alone. Security and police, nor 2 guys found anyone. There was a few staff only, and fire exit doors opened down the corridor, so plenty of escape routes for whoever this guy was. I gave my statements down at the station later that day once my parents showed up. The police said they had security tapes from the cameras that point down the corridor and will keep us updated with any news. Hopefully, they find this guy.
Whether they did or they didn't. That didn't, that's worse. Because the more that they not going to try to find him, the more that he going to stop more girls. So, I don't see why they don't do nothing safe. Nothing safe. Hello. True horror story about a man from the bus stop.
This happened to me when I was 17 years old.
That'd be a good one.
I live in Canada, and this situation took place during a snowstorm at around 9 p.m. It was extremely dark outside, and I was waiting inside a bus stop shelter after my part-time job to get home. Although I live in a crowded city in Toronto, it was very quiet that night, and there were barely any cars on the road due to hazardous weather conditions. I was waiting all by myself for about 10 minutes until one man who looked like he was in his 50s entered the shelter. He had a disgusting smirk on his face, which made him a bit creepy looking. And that pretty large guy started making small talk with me. He had a creepy low voice, and he kept asking me what I was doing out in this weather and where I was going. I was feeling anxious, but there was only me and that man, so I told him I was going home after work. He smiled and said to me that the buses are going to be delayed because of the weather and won't be...
Do not ever tell a stranger where y'all be.
Coming in for a really long time. I took out my phone to check the bus times. However, due to the deadly cold weather, my phone died completely. Then he came closer to me. He smelled awfully disgusting. "Hey, you want to come with me for 5 minutes?" he said. I said, "I'm sorry, sir. What do you mean?" He said, "Let's go hang out for a bit. Don't worry, you won't miss your bus. I will bring you back safely. Come on." I wasn't stupid and was aware of pedophiles, so I stepped back and refused. But he kept insisting that I should go with him. I was so afraid that he would do something bad to me. However, luckily, one lady came into the shelter, and the man immediately closed his mouth. After waiting for some time, the bus finally arrived. It was me, the lady, that creepy man, and 2 other people on the bus. He sat all the way at the back of the bus where he could watch me clearly, and I noticed that he kept staring and staring. I was so nervous, and when it was my stop, I got off along with the lady. And as I kept walking, I saw that the man got off with us and was right behind me. I freaked out and thought there was no choice at all, so I grabbed the lady's arm and asked her if she could walk me home because a man was following me. She also noticed that the guy was acting strangely, so she whispered that she would take me home. I walked with the lady, and when I looked back, he stared at me for a while and disappeared. When I arrived home, my parents and I thanked that lady repeatedly. And after that, I never saw him again in my life.
Well, I'm glad that girl came, because it wasn't for that girl.
Steve! Steve, are you in there? Alex, if you're reading this, then I'm not home. I've gone to collect wood to fix the leak in my roof. No need to look into it any further. Whatever you do, don't look through the window because I'm definitely 100% not there. Oh, and this was...
I might download the, A Secret Basement in a Hospital. Secret in a Hospital. Wow.
I work as a nurse in a hospital, although I can't reveal exactly where because of privacy reasons. Recently, a fairly popular celebrity came to be treated here, although I can't reveal who due to the aforementioned privacy reasons. Honestly, I was pretty surprised he was coming here. Not to shit talk my place of employment, but this place has a bit of a record of being really bad in caring for people. Not that I'm a bad nurse or anything, it's just that a lot of the surgeons seem to fuck up their job and not get fired for some reason. This made it all the more confusing to me that this celebrity came here for surgery to remove a late-stage brain tumour. Speaking of, my friend Patricia was a huge fan and really wanted to be the one assigned to him post-surgery. She was even thinking of asking him for an autograph, which seemed unprofessional to me. Anyway, he was flying in for treatment tomorrow, but my current job was to assist a surgeon with the surgery of a little boy who swallowed a bunch of his toy marbles. I was surprised they decided to opt for surgery though, because they were previously recommended to wait for him to pass them. It was me, the anesthesiologist, and the surgeon in the room. I was staying nearby to the site of the surgery, and everything seemed to be going well. Then, the surgeon slipped and cut the kid's stomach lining open. It was horrific. The smell of stomach acid almost made me vomit as it began to dissolve his intestines. Despite our best efforts, he was dead within 10 minutes. What disturbed me was how unfazed the surgeon was. After we failed to save him, the surgeon left to break the news to the parents almost immediately after. I thought I heard the anesthesiologist mumble something under her breath, but I couldn't understand clearly. It was something about food. My shift was over though, and I walked to the subway to grab some dinner, then caught the bus home. I was pretty tired, so I watched some Netflix in bed until I fell asleep. That night I had a dream, or more accurately, a nightmare. I was in the hospital, and that kid was there in front of me. Only his whole body was hollow and his chest cavity was open and bloody. His eyes were gone too, but still, he stared at me, and the entire time he pointed straight down. I finally woke up, and with relief from being free of that dream and more guilt from the failed surgery, I started my day. I got to work and Patricia was fairly bubbly. She spent almost the whole morning talking my ear off about the celebrity. When he finally came in, she started freaking out and tried to walk up and talk to him. His bodyguards pushed her away though, and she returned to her duties dejectedly. Just before my lunch break, I was called into my supervisor's office. He said he had something very important for me to do, and that it needed to be done ASAP. He told me to go to the transplant center and get 10 hearts, then go to the basement. I was pretty confused and wanted to ask some questions, but he cut me off and yelled,
"Either you can do this shit right now, or you can walk out and kiss your job goodbye."
I was pretty pissed. He would fire me daring to ask a question, but the management would avoid firing the incompetent surgeons even though they should. I left in a huff to go collect the organs and found them waiting in a case there already, with a note signed by the doctor that gave me access to a restricted room in the basement simply called Room 60. I didn't have the slightest clue what was in there, and marched onwards to the elevator and went down to the basement. I walked to Room 60 and showed the security guard my note. He looked me over and said, "Oh, this is your first time doing this, huh? I feel sorry for you. Try not to panic if you know what's good for you." He then unlocked the door, and I stepped in. Immediately I was hit with a smell I would describe as rotten eggs, pennies, and a corpse. The ground was slick with something and it was dark in there too, with only one dim overhead light. The room was pretty big, and in the middle I saw some nondescript blob. Then I heard what sounded like a deep breath in, and the blob started moving. The thing, which I now started to realise was a body, was walking towards me with stumpy, fat legs. I screamed and tried to run away, but I slipped on the ground. As my face got smeared in it, I realised the stuff on the floor was blood, and as I turned onto my back, I was face to face with the thing. It looked like a very pale, morbidly obese man, although it was much taller and much fatter than any human could be. It had large curled horns, as well as no mouth. Instead, where its mouth should be, there was just a row of pitch-black, pointy, needle-like teeth surrounding a hole. It paid me no heed, and reached out to pick up the box of organs. It opened the box, and ate all the hearts in handfuls, stuffing 3 at a time in its mouth. I was terrified and ran out the door, slamming it shut behind me. The security guard looked me in the eyes and put a reaffirming hand on my shoulder. It looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. He told me that he would walk me out of the building, and that I could have the rest of the day off. Now I'm at home, still shaking and typing this up. I got a text from Patricia, and apparently the celebrity's surgery was a massive success. I'm wondering what I even do now. Is this the type of thing I can report? Would anyone believe me?
Scary. Lil Wood, let me check out some llama arts. I don't even know the llama arts made one. I don't see why he just stopped making it for a month. Nah, llama arts, nah. I almost can name in the winter.
When I was 11 years old, I spent the night hanging out with my closest friend at the time. I left around 7 o'clock. He was about 15 to 20 minute walk away from my house. It was the month of December, so it was icy and dark outside. While I was walking down the long sidewalk, I had to make a turn halfway. Across the turn down the sidewalk, I noticed a man way further down. He was alone at the moment. 10 seconds later, a 4-door car drove up to him. It was a long street till my turn, so I watched him talk to whoever it was in the car. It sped off, and he just stopped, watching me as I walked. As I kept walking, all I heard was, "Hey you, come here, stop, hey you." So I freaked out. I started walking faster and then noticed he started running toward me. I started running for my life. Since the ground was covered in snow and ice, all I literally thought was, please, God, don't let me slip. I was crying, and I was running. He caught up extremely fast. I kept looking back and noticed the car slowly driving behind him. As I ran, I felt his arm reach out and try to grab the hood of my sweatshirt. By God's grace, his hand slipped, and I ran a block trying to find a house with the lights on. I finally found one and banged at the door, almost ready to break it down. This older couple finally answered, and I ran inside explaining what happened. The husband then went outside to try to find him. When he went out, he saw the man standing at the end of the street staring at him. Then he ran off. My mom called the police and pulled me out of school for 4 days afterward. And this guy was never found. For a while after, I would buy flowers and a card and leave it on the couple's step, thanking them for saving my life. God only knows what would have happened if he got me and dragged me to the car.
She got snatched. Hey, that was just funny.
When I was 18, I only just recently got out of a relationship with a significant other, and I wanted to see other people. I took up online dating on this app that I don't want to name. I never told my parents about my previous relationship, or the guys that I talked to online, so they know nothing about this story. But I still need to tell them one day. Anyway, within a short period of time, I received lots of messages from guys. Most of them were perverts, or just didn't catch my attention, until a cute guy messaged me. I forgot his name, so we'll just call him Justin. Justin was around 23 years old at the time. When he messaged me, he told me how attractive I was and showered me with affection and romantic text messages. I was naive at the time, so I was awed and blushed when he told me all that. We started to get to know each other. He was living in Canada, and I was a Polish girl living in the United States. We had a few hobbies in common, and we both went to college. I was studying to be a police officer to get an associate's degree, and he was going to university to get a bachelor's degree. Then, eventually, his messages started to make me uncomfortable. He said that he preferred white girls over Asian girls, and that he always wanted to have sex with a white girl. He asked me if I was still a virgin, and even though I felt uncomfortable, I said yes. He started talking to me sexually, and I didn't like it, but I complied. Then he asked me if I could visit him sometime in Canada, even though I just met him a couple days ago. Living with my parents in a strict Polish...
Yeah, that's dumb. If you met somebody in a couple days, I mean, you could like them, but how you gonna visit somebody and you only just met them a couple weeks or days? I could see it was like 6 months or maybe a year. Like, I can see it like that, but a couple days.
household, I told him that I couldn't because of that. He then argued that I was an adult and I could make my own decisions, which was true, but as a Polish person, you still have to listen to your parents even though you're an adult. Of course, I did tell him that I lived in the United States, but I didn't tell him exactly where I live. He then asked me if I lived in XYZ town in XYZ state. I was shocked when he asked this because I never told him exactly where I lived, and on my profile, I did not give out my location, so I have no idea how he found out about that.
Okay, the reason why I probably know that he figured out her location, she probably turned it on. She probably didn't know that she turned it on. Cause my phone do that. Like, wishes y'all could see. If y'all could really see that, that's just, I don't turn my location on. I'm tripping. I don't see why I turn that on. I should be turning it off.
Lied to him and said that I didn't, but he said I was lying and I confessed. Then he asked me for my address, but I refused to give it to him. He got angry and said that everyone gave their address out, which of course I knew wasn't true. I then blocked him, but the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I heard that in my neighborhood, there was a break-in. 2 men broke into a house, but they didn't steal anything. Instead, they might have been looking for someone. My heart jumped when I heard this. Justin was looking for me. A couple houses later, and they gave up. I waited a while later, and I have not heard about anything like this again. I dread to think what might have happened if Justin found the right house in my neighborhood and kidnapped me.
Well, you would, alright, this be one more. Yeah, this be one more, and then we done with this episode.
I've been followed by creeps before, and in one case was almost assaulted. I was never truly scared about that type of stuff. I've been through a lot in my life, and I consider myself to be pretty strong. Even when some creep attempted to assault me, I wasn't scared because I knew I was gonna beat his ass, and I did. I never feel threatened unless I get my gut feeling. I know when something bad's gonna happen, or if someone is a shady character, etc. My friends tell me I have some type of sixth sense. I'm not one for superstition, but I also have to agree it gets really weird, and I'm almost always right. One day, I got the worst gut feeling I ever had in my life. I was in my first year of college, living in some very nice apartments. I loved living there. It was a Friday, and right as I left the hallway of my apartment complex and started walking, a beat-up rusty truck pulled up as if on cue. There were 2 guys inside. One was a pretty big guy with tattoos and looked like he just got out of prison, and the other one was super skinny with glasses. The second I laid my eyes on them, I had my gut feeling kick in. It was worse than usual, and I immediately felt like shit. The big guy was driving and started to tell me things like, "You are so beautiful, come over here, let's talk. You're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen." I didn't want to walk to my car because I didn't want them to know what car I drive. And I didn't want to walk back to my house because I lived on the first floor, which is easier to break into. And if they didn't know already where I lived, I wanted to keep them from finding out. So I started walking to the front office of the apartment complex, which was a little far away. I already had my pocket knife out, but hidden in my sweater sleeve. They kept calling out, trailing me as I walked to the office. I kept my eye on them so I knew what they were up to. They eventually asked me to go to a party with them. The big guy said, "We're having a party at 2 a.m. at a friend's house who lives here. Wanna come? We can all hang out beforehand and get to know each other before we go." It was around 3:30 p.m. at the time, just for your information. I ignored them and told them, "No, stop bothering me." They kept trying to persuade me by saying nice things and stuff, and eventually they both said, "If you come with us, we'll give you a free pair of shoes." The skinny guy then leans back and starts digging around the back seat. I stopped to look because I wanted to make sure he wasn't gonna grab a gun or duct tape or some shit like that. I was a good few feet away from the truck and took a running position just in case. He pulls out a dark blue suitcase from the back seat and opens it. Inside there are maybe 100 different pairs of shoes. The sizing ranged from a small pink Dora the Explorer shoe to an adult-sized woman's stilettos. That's the moment where my gut feeling went into a frenzy. My knees became so weak I threw up on the spot. I've never felt so sick and felt so disgusted in my entire life. I felt pure evil. I held my place for a while and out some take trophies of their victims.
Alright, y'all. that's the end of it, because it's going to let me stop recording. Make sure y'all please subscribe and hit that like button. And comment down below if y'all want me to react to some more. And react to some more Corey Kitchen. And I might try not to do that challenge on this one. Alright, and I'll see you on the next time. Peace.